stream again. Hopefully we should be okay now. So namaste and welcome to Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam for this Kaivalya Marga class, a special series that we are offering on these 9 days of Navaratri. This is the first Navaratri that KYG, Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam, is celebrating online, and therefore these offerings. We shall begin this satsang, this session, as always, with 3 ohms, so our mind gets more focused and we become mindful of the thoughts and words and ideas we entertain at this time. Namaste. I am indeed very, very, very grateful to the universe for making this possible, for giving me the strength and some element of clarity in being able to express what for so many decades has been such a very personal experience and continues to be a very personal series of experiences, if you will. What I'm sharing with you is a very a personal dimension that I experience. And I keep saying personal because none of these are objective. These may or may not even apply to you all. But satsang is about learning from each other. It's about sharing. And your experiences could be similar, but it could be a little different. So instead of a red rose, you might have a pink rose. Instead of a pink rose, you might have a yellow rose. But it'll still be a rose. In other words, it'll still be a divine spiritual experience. So take everything that I say and share as this is Sundar's experience. How can I relate to that? What can I learn from that? And how can I apply it in my own practice? This is the best way that you can invoke your own divinity. Otherwise, you'll be relying on Sundar's version of Kundalini, Sundar's version of experiences, and comparing with Sundar's experiences. It doesn't work that way. It didn't work for me at all that way. When I began this path many years ago in Puttaparthi and began to understand, I too wanted to know more. So I too looked for books. Those days there was no internet, thankfully, I think, because there's too much information is not good. But I came across a book written by Ravi Shankar. And it was a scary book. And it confused me more than anything. And that is why I keep saying that don't rely on someone's experience to tell you what is this path, whether it's dangerous or not, whether it is good or not, whether this is the right one or not. Listen to your heart, open your heart, connect to the divine, invoke that divine within you. Trust me, don't feel that distance that you are somehow far away from the divine and somehow I am more closer to the divine or somebody else is more closer. That is the furthest from truth. So what I am doing here is merely sharing, and I want to be your friend and guide, if that is a right term to put in this path, because we learn from each other, we share each other's path and continue in this path to divinity. So it is always with that attitude and perspective that I'm sharing these. So today we are on this 6th day or 6th night, if you will, of Navaratri. where we are exploring one more astral dimension in this progress of the Kundalini. In other words, in this path of awakening, which some experience it as the Kundalini, we explore this dimension that we come across and know as the Granti. So let us go to the slides right away. Today we are going to talk about a Granti called Vishnu Granti. We have already talked about Granti before, right? So what is a Granti? Granti is a knot. If you remember in the Mooladhara class, in the Brahma Granti class, I explained how I took the analogy of the hose pipe through which the water flows, and you're watering your garden, and if there's a knot in the pipe, the water stops from flowing, depending on how stringent the knot is. If it is too tight, there'll be no water flowing. If it is loose, there'll be some water flowing, right? In most of our cases, the knots are not completely stringent. The fact that you are here in the satsang, either live or going to watch it later, the fact that you are even a believer in the divine. In other words, when I say believer in the divine, not necessarily in the religious sense, but the fact that your mind is able to open up to a dimension beyond senses. Because what is belief? Where senses don't give you that reality. Senses don't give you that knowledge. There is nothing tangible that you can rely on to base your belief in, and yet that belief is there. Correct? Something like love, for example. Love is one of those things that you experience either with a spouse, a parent, a guru, or even a movie or a film, whatever. Love, the point is, sometimes there is no tangible explanation as to why you love somebody or something. But it is there, right? So it is like that. The fact that you are even a believer in divinity, a believer in the path, believer in prayer, believer in meditation, and so on, believer in that there is something more to life than this. The fact that you're even getting into that is that these knots are not stringently tied. I don't even know if that's the right term, stringent, but I'm meaning if the knot is very tight, then there'll be zero flow. You won't even have this awareness. Okay, you won't even have the awareness outside the senses. The Brahma Granthi stops right there at the bottom. We explored that a little bit, right? But in most of our cases, the fact, like I said, because we are here, it means that these knots are not fully tied, which is good news. So there is a little bit of energy that flows. Okay? And it's the same going to be with the Vishnu Granthi as well. Now, with Kundalini itself, I just want to make it clear because it comes to my mind, and if I'm repeating, bear with me here. The Shakti itself, the fact that even we are thinking about God or thinking about divinity, the fact that we even look into books and start reading, it means that chakras are already operating. The fact that you have some talent in painting, writing, or singing, or speaking, or you're able to think of some selfless activity like seva, or service, or work, your heart reaches out to people beyond you. All of these are signs of the chakras opening. Okay? So none of us can exist if the chakras are fully closed. So chakras are functioning, the energy moves up and down. But the amount of energy that moves, the amount of opening of these chakras vary between people. And it is not a linear thing. All the chakras are open, and there's a combination of these chakras that is presented around you, that presents itself as an experience. It's a combination of chakras. There's a predominant chakra that operates, but there's always a combination of these chakras that allow the energy to express through you, through that center of consciousness where your consciousness rests at that moment. So in that divine dream or vision where you are one with your deity, your anahata is open in the sense to partially, allowing you to get the glimpse of what lies in the layers of anahata itself, the beauty that lies in, right? The Vaikuntha that resides in anahata. So that is the beauty there. So we now talking about a granthi. Now, what is Vishnu? What is a granthi? A granthi, like we said last time, is a spiritual block in the manomaya kosha. All the granthis are blocks in the manomaya kosha. The mind, again, each kosha is again, there are layers of koshas or types of koshas, if you will. So in annamaya kosha, physical sheath, what are the different layers? You have many systems, right? You have skeletal system that is very easily discernible. There is muscular system that is a little less discernible. Skin. Then there is the digestive system, then there is the endocrine system, then there is a nervous system. So all of these are different systems. Some are very easily discernible and seen, some are very subtle, correct? And so they are different systems in Annamaya Kosha. Like that in each kosha, in Pranamaya Kosha, there are different pranas. Prana, Apana, Samana, Vyana, Udana, and there are other 10 vayus. So there are so many vayus that work in the Pranamaya Kosha, bringing in this life force from all the 5 elements and distributing it in your body. Similarly, in the mind, the West has understood only these layers as conscious, subconscious, unconscious. So I use that many times because that is a way we can relate easily at that moment. It's easy to convey. But the Manomaya Kosha is more at the level of the Chitta, which has got so many aspects in it. The vibrations of the ego, the intellect, the senses, all of that. Each one is an energy that is forming this Manomaya Kosha. If you go back to the Sankhya school of thought that I shared with you in that chart, the mind consists of 10, 5 and 5 indriyas, right? 5 senses of action and cognition. So these are all parts of that mind. So there are many layers in the mind itself, and combinations of all of these have their own layers in the mind. So in the mind itself, there are many levels of blocks as well that one perceives as this path begins to unfold. And the more subtler the blocks are, the more the difficult it is to remove. So eventually you will begin to understand, and some of you perhaps already understand this and would agree with me, that sense control and getting over the initial fear and the Brahma Granthi opening is the easiest among, relatively. It's easy compared to this Vishnu Granthi. Vishnu Granthi, so what is Vishnu Granthi therefore? Vishnu Granthi is again a combination. So this combines the Manipura and the Anahata obstacles. So what is that? It is the ego, emotion, duality knot, if you will. Why? Because the I is born in Manipura, the I is merging into the Anahata, and the Vishnu Granthi tide begins to hold that idea of separation, duality. So the I is not merging into that deity and getting the true awakening, right? So that is an obstacle there. That's where we get stuck. We could spend lifetimes in Vishnu Granthi. Not that it is a bad thing, right? Sometimes we feel very comfortable saying what? That I am very happy. I am just a simple devotee. I don't know all this, and God is there. I am here. I'm very happy. I'm going to do my puja a little bit. I'm very happy. So you settle in duality. You don't even think beyond that. You say, no, I don't know all this oneness and all that. I'm just like this. I will always be me, and God will always be God. I'm different, and so on. That kind of duality or separation and your comfort level there simply means that knot is nice and tight. It is not letting the energy even go beyond. For you to even open your mind to think, what is non-duality? What is Advaita? What is this I am God principle, right? But Baba came to open all those knots, and his teachings open these knots. And that's why I get so charged when I talk about him, because he did that to me. Anyway, so not, like I said, it's not bad, but it's a limitation. It's for you. All these classes are just to open your mind to think in these lines. Okay, when somebody talks to you very vehemently about God is separate, we are separate, all this is philosophy, nothing is going to happen and all, just mentally bow to him, reverentially understand that he is talking or she is talking or they're expressing the ideas within this Granthi. The Granthi is not open, and maybe you can relate to it because the Granthi is open. So for you, you're like, how do you not understand? Right? So the question to resolve those kind of issues are to open the Granthi, and the means of opening Granthi we will see. Again, it's very simple and yet very difficult. So Vishnu Granti is ego. Then the other thing we talk about is emotions. Like I said yesterday, this anger and all of that, we get caught and we begin to form a dimension of reality based on emotions alone. Emotions are very powerful. Okay, they sway the wind element, right? The Vishnu Granti. So when your breathing becomes erratic when you're angry, what has caused the wind to go out of control? Emotion. So when there is pressure that does not stops you, then the wind gets perturbed. The wind is not able to channelize itself. Okay? So understand it from that. Same thing from excessive desire, excessive passion of some kind, excessive emotions disturb the breath in you. That's why they say first take a deep breath, calm down. Whether you're upset, whether you're crying, whether you're angry, whether you're excited in some form, enthusiastic, like 5-year-old jumping up and down because they're going to get a horse ride or something, extremely excited. You say, first you be calm, then I'm not going to send you on this horse without you being calm, because you know there is danger involved. So those kind of emotional storms, if you will, are created because of Vishnu Granti. And those can be bhakti storms as well. There's intense yearning, if you read in the stories of the saints, not yearning of who am me, poor me, and I, and me and mine, but the yearning for God is that energy trying to open and go through this Granthi. Right? So that pain in the devotion, that awakening in the devotion happens when the knot begins to loosen. So where is this Granthi located? The Granthi is located exactly, it's above the Manipura and Anahata chakra. First of all, let's get that very clear. Okay, just like the Brahma Granthi is above the Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Brahma Granthi. Manipura, Anahata, Vishnu Granthi. It's exactly in between. If this is Vishuddha, this hole here, this is Vishuddha. And this center here, I don't know, you can't see that here, but the center here is Anahata. Right here in the chest, right here is in between these two buttons, if you will. Right in the chest here is the Vishnu Granthi. We'll talk about this more in point locations and all, but that's not really so important to know exact location. Like I said, these are all energy centers. I've never succeeded in isolating a location and something happening there. But this is where the Granthi opens. This is again comes with the divine grace. This Granthi opening also happens with divine grace, of course accompanied with the sadhana. Please remember one thing. When I talk about an experience with Baba and say that this is how he helped me, please don't go back home saying he got lucky, he had a Baba who did this for him, what about me? Then you're missing the whole point. I don't know how else to explain that, because that is how I experience, right? So don't feel disheartened that you didn't have that kind of experience. That's why I said don't compare. The fact that you're listening to it means the universe is guiding you and preparing you for your own path. And your path can be much more richer, much more beautiful than what I am sharing. So there's no, when I say much more and all that, there's an element of comparison, and that's not the right way to even say it. But I am saying that because I do get emails or texts saying you're so lucky you had Baba to guide you in this path, and you had these gurus to guide you in this path. You are lucky too. The fact that you're beginning to open your mind to these, that means the universe is preparing you. And allow this Devi, allow her to guide you, allow her to open the doors. Trust in that process, believe. That is what that Manipuraka chakra is. Believe in the I, in you is divine. Have self-confidence in your own experiences. Write them down and maintain a spiritual journey, diary, and understand, meditate on those experiences. Begin to go into your temple. Being inspired by satsangs like these, you have to discover your path. That's what it is. So if you watch if you watch my Himalayan trek video and say, I also want to go there, by all means go. Now find your own way and your own path, right? It may not necessarily be the same. It could be similar, but it may not necessarily be the same. You might have checked into a different hotel. You might have met a much better guide than me who took you up. And you may have had a much better darshan. You may not have experienced rainfalls and snow and all of that during the path. So all of that changes. The journey is more or less the same. You got inspired by what I said about my Himalayan trek and you went on your own. That is how the spiritual path is also. Why am I saying this? Is because I want to say how I experience this Brahma Granthi opening is because of Baba's grace. And I mentioned this in another incident about how I was so stuck with Swami's physical form, Baba's physical form. Perhaps stuck is not the right word. I was enjoying that. But there was an inner yearning with me. That yearning began. That the form was separate from me. In other words, I didn't know all this. Okay, I was just saying, I want more of Swami. I want more of him. I want more of him. I want more of him. So when that yearning came, I would write to Baba every day. This, I want more of you, more of you. Why more of you? So he would talk to me. He would call me from work inside the mandir. There's that. All of that was going on. But in spite of that, that yearning became only more instead of being satisfied. So was I greedy? I don't know. I didn't know how to handle that craving for him. It wasn't necessarily physical, but that physical proximity was not helping me, giving me that satisfaction. But I didn't know what I was asking for. And I kept writing to Swami. And I've shared this. And I call this from Swami to Sai. Swami is how we used to address our guru. In the South, we call them Swami. Is Lord. It means Lord. It's a very endearing way to call the Guru, Swami or Swamiji or Guruji. But Swami is a very South Indian, Telugu people, Tamil, Kannada people, we call Swami. So, from Swami to Sai is what I keep sharing this experience. But in those experiences, I have not talked about Granti and all that. But now that we are talking from a Kundalini perspective, this is exactly what happened. And why I know it is here is the Granti being here is very subtly, Baba did this. So there was an afternoon when I was unpacking something. He looked at me, he said, what more do you want? He asked. Because by then I had written so many letters, I want more and more. I knew what he was hinting at. I said, I want you, Baba. He said, here I am, take me. Ikkadunna, Tisko. Tisko means take. I'm here, take. I just looked at him, I didn't know what to do. What do you mean take? Then he smiled. And that afternoon he was very benevolent, very, very sweet, very, very guru-like. I can never forget that. So, he called me, made me sit at his feet. And he asked this beautiful question, Niku Swami kavala, Sai kavala. You want Swami or Sai? And I said, I didn't know what it meant. And I just said, impulsively, I said, I want both. Iddaru kavala. Then Swami shook his head like this. Very, very, very sweetly. He decided, you know what, this dumb fool needs to be explained clearly, I guess. He said, Swami will be there today, won't be there tomorrow. Meaning his physical form. When we say Swami, it's that what we mean, right? So by then I was meditating on his form. I used to have this form, right, beautifully starting from here, going into the, just filling my whole chest region. So beautiful it was, because I would sit in the bhajan hall and watch him every day, morning and evening, and most of the times in the evenings. Later on became morning and evening. From top of his hair to its feet, I would meditate completely, memorize him physically. He's sitting there 15 minutes, waving and doing all this, and I will memorize. And then the next day morning I will say, what did I see last night? And I will go through that exact darshan once again. So his form became very alive, very active. And that's why I guess the yearning became even more. There is something in this form, there is something I want more of Swami, right? That's where all this was. So he said, no. Swami ippudu untadu, ఈ రోజు ఉంటాడు, రేపు ఉండడు. ఈ రోజు పుట్టపర్తిలో ఉంటాడు, రేపు బృందావనంలో ఉంటాడు. In other words, he went on like this, saying, Swami will be there today, won't be there tomorrow. He will be in Prashanti Nilayam today. He will be in Bangalore tomorrow. He will talk to you today. He may not talk to you tomorrow. He will see you today. He may not look at you tomorrow, and so on. But Sai, he said, will be always with you. Intene, gentene, ventene, kantene. Swami has used this many times. He said, inside, outside, above, below you, around you, Sai will be there. Always. Whom do you want? At that time I said, I want Sai. I got that at that moment. Suddenly, not very clearly, but something clicked and I said, Swami Sai Kavala. Manchidi, he said. Manchidi. Very good. So before saying that, Swami opened 2 buttons and he pointed here. He put his finger right on my chest right here. Sai ikkada untadu and jentane he opened that. So the point was, I don't know if it was that touch of Swami or what. That click I said happened. And then he said, okay, very good. And I bent down, I kissed his feet, he blessed me profusely. I got up. And that's it. I went back to work. The boxes and all was arranged. In the evening, bhajans went. All that happened. In the night, I began to wonder what is going on. What does that even mean, Swami to Sai now, right? So that became a whole different thing. And somewhere I've talked about it more in detail. But it took me another couple of weeks of intense meditation and trying to understand. Now I realize no more asking Swami what does it mean. He has given me homework to do. So I went deep into meditation. Every morning after the Omkar chanting, I would meditate on his form. At the end of the form, I would say, but this is Swami. What did he mean by Sai? Swami, I understood he meant as physical form. This is a Swami, I know, but he's here today, tomorrow. The form is here, form won't be there, and so on and so forth. What is Sai? And that is when I had the first experience of the light, where the form of Swami disappeared. There was a tremendous light that filled my whole being and exploded through the top of my head and went beyond. This was not simply a vision. This was not a dream. This was my first, most beautiful spiritual experience that exploded completely. So that opened the door to the idea of Sai is everything, the whole energy of this universe, Sai Tattva. So Sai Tattva, when I say Sai, now because this has happened many decades ago, almost 40 years ago, I think. So because this has happened so long ago, now for me, Shiva, Sai, Krishna, none of them make difference. They all open the same doors, and it's amazing. It's a very different experience. Very easily, if you will, in my especially in the last 7-8 years, after having given my job and going deep into this, every year it's building up so fast and furiously. The deities become more, and I'm saying deities again, I don't know, somehow I can't tune into that English word deities, but the devas, the divine beings, become more and more alive. So there is no difference between Shiva, Vishnu, Narayana, Sai. For me, there is no difference at all. Absolutely no difference. So that is how I believe, long story short, that Vishnu Granti is here. And he touched me and he opened that Granthi for me, because I was struggling to understand what is beyond this form, what is beyond the love for this form, what is there, right? It doesn't mean it was completely locked, because there is other things like creativity, singing, all of that happens only with Vishuddha Chakra open. So there was energy flowing, but it wasn't flowing enough for me to begin to get the aha moments. And after that, it was not easy, but the energy started flowing. And then, of course, with spiritual practice, sadhana and all of that, continuous yearning and introspection. And this is a very internal path. It has always been until the last 5 years, let's say. The path of Kundalini. So the opening has been very gradual, but very, very, very divine. So before we go, it should not be, it should be Vishnu Granti, not Brahma Granti. I made a mistake, but I don't want to correct it now. So what is the effects of Vishnu Granti? It's not Brahma Granti, it is Vishnu Granti. Please bear with that. Apologize for that mistake. So because it is a combination at the physical level, what happens when this Granthi becomes, this Granthi exists, and this Granthi becomes, it doesn't become loose, it becomes an obstacle. Granthis are always obstacles. So Granthis are knots, right? They prevent the energy flowing. What is the effect of that in your physical body? Look at these. Think of blood pressure, hypertension, acidity, all relating to Manipuraka. and the heart chakra. So when we talk of cleansing the chakras and all, what actually helps in the full cleansing is when the granthis begin to open. Granthis open only with grace and with divine practice, spiritual practice. Especially Vishnu Granti opens, I believe, it's my experience, only with devotion. Nothing else opens Vishnu Granti. So diseases of the heart and stomach generally. Then you have excess of vata and pitta. I'm not going into Ayurveda part of it. For those of you who know Ayurveda a little bit, vata is excessive. Excess vata means you're hyper. There is excess vayu, hyper. You work like a whirlwind till you're tired. For example, the examples of vata. Pitta is you can't stand the sun, you'll start throwing up. A little bit of heat stroke happens, acidity and all of that. So excess of vata and pitta are all results of Vishnu Granti. What else? Inability to get quality sleep because of acidity. You won't be able to sleep well. You'll have heartburn. Because of hypertension and blood pressure, you will be tossing and turning in your bed. Not because of that, but generally because of granthis being there. All of these are signs. These are just for you to think about. Don't get over anxious. But these are the signs that happens in the physical body because of Vishnu Granti. Then pranamaya. So what happens when your granthi begins to open up and channel, when spiritual energy begins to flow, Kundalini begins to go more freely. In other words, you're able to converse with your divine more. You're able to see all of these begin to automatically subside. That is why in Hatha Yoga, the yogis lived long and lived healthy and lived, their bodies were reflective of these happenings. Otherwise, yoga becomes a philosophy. It doesn't reflect in someone who talks about it, and therefore it becomes a philosophy for them. It becomes theoretical for them. And I guess that is why Baba told me, when you're 50 and you're still practicing, that time you start talking. And because I come from a family of hypertension and blood pressure and diabetes and all that. It's there, hereditary and all of that, heart problems. My father died of that at the age of 66. But touch wood, I'm going to be 60 in less than a month now. And entering 60. And I've not taken a single pill for either hypertension or blood pressure or diabetes or anything, in spite of when the snake bit me many years ago, when I was 27, the sugar had shot up and I was treated for sugar at that time, and they said, forever now you're diabetic. I said, yeah, thanks, I'll work on it. And that's all. Once that came under control, it has never shown its ugly face again. I owe all, that's why I keep saying I owe everything to Hatha Yoga practice and yoga practice and everything. It's a spiritual lifestyle. There is one answer for all medical problems. That is spiritual lifestyle. And spiritual lifestyle involves physical discipline, mental discipline, spiritual discipline. And this all of this namasmarana, japa, meditation, yoga practices, all of that is part of that, part and parcel of that lifestyle. This is how I learned. This is how I want to continue practicing. Okay, so if and when I do catch a cold, I ask myself, what was it that caused it? I go deep inside to analyze what was it that caused it, and I release that block. And when I've understood that means that the chances of catching cold and all of that becomes very, very less, right? And even if it comes, comes and just goes away mildly. Like if I travel to India now and the change in climate and all that will cause a little bit of running nose for a couple of days and it'll go away. It's like that. It's a very natural thing. But all of that is because of these granthis and energy flows. If I stop my spiritual lifestyle, then from day one, the granthis will start going back and all of the energy start going back to that dormant state. And I will come and live a very normal life of where the body begins to fall sick. I won't know what to do. I take pills, I do this and that, and we start hobbling and relying on so many crutches just to live through our lives. Hatha Yoga breaks you from those. spiritual practice in general breaks you from those. And that's why these are taught at a younger age. That's why I was grateful to be learning this at a younger age. It's never too late to learn anyway. Pranamaya kosha. In prana, in the pranic body, how does this affect the Vyana and Samana Vayu? Samana Vayu, we touched upon it in Manipuraka, where the ability to digest and send the energies of the food in different directions. He's sitting there and saying, go ahead, you go here, you go there, and you go there, and you go to the brain, you go down to the feet. So the Samana Vayu is giving directions, command center. Who's carrying out that energy? Vyana. Vyana is like the little sevadals, if you will, the little selfless workers. Vyana energy. Vyana is like a nervous system, if you can understand, just to draw a parallel. They exist throughout the body. So they are carrying this energy all through. The communications between the brain and all of this is done with Vyana. Vyana does all the running around job. In other words, Vyana is omnipresent in the body. It's a very important Vayu. Without that, you feel completely down. So the ability for Vyana to move freely, in other words, a healthy nervous system, the ability for Samana Vayu to function clearly, in other words, a healthy digestive system, both of these can get impaired if the Vishnu Granti becomes more and more tight or remains tight. Then the Manomaya kosha, the three koshas that are always affected. Manomaya kosha, what happens? These are the things that happen. Excessive emotions come in, like anger, attachment. I put within brackets love because sometimes we mistake love and attachment as the same. Attachment is one form of love, a minute fraction of love. Love is far more different than attachment. So anger, attachment, delusions. We get deluded. All of that comes here. This is almost like a Rahu sitting here. Rahu is that planet which begins to delude you. Dhumra Lochana, if you will, that's a demon that who Devi fought, because he clouds your vision. He creates delusions, makes you think of weird things. So delusions is part of this Brahma Granthi. We start deluding ourselves, thinking somehow I'm not progressing or I am progressing, and this, all of this is delusion. Worries, excessive worries, idea of separation, fear of separation, dual principle, and control obsession. So control obsession comes because of Manipuraka chakra, from the energy not being able to function properly in the Manipuraka chakra. The eye becomes so important. That's why I said Rahu energy. The eye becomes, the head only exists. The rest of the body of Rahu doesn't exist. Some days when we'll understand the basics of Vedic astrology, you'll be able to compare all this. Okay, so there what happens is the I becomes more important. I want to control this. Starting from give me the remote. I want to be in charge of the remote in the house when you watch a TV. From there to every single thing, excessive obsession with control. Where a parent becomes excessively obsessed with, no, child, you got to drive like this. No, you do this, you do that, you wear this, you wear that. And we become so exactly how he should think or she should think, what should they believe and not believe, and we try to live our lives through them. All of this happens because in the Manomaya kosha, in our kosha, it happens because of Vishnu Granti. Again, I need to change that Brahma Granti. Bear with me. It's because of Vishnu Granti, Manomaya kosha. Thoughts are inflamed with excessive visualizations. Visualization, remember we started doing visualization on the deity. This is why in Namasmarana, the name and the form become so important. I cannot understand. That's why in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says those who are with form, it's very difficult for you to go to formless for those who are with the form. Okay? So it is important for us to know that the name and the form are so important, because when you visualize the form of your deity peacefully sitting there, calmly sitting there, the beauty and the rich and decked with jewels and ornaments, the richness, abundance, all of that begins to guide this energy which will create delusions, this energy which will create fear and worries. It will help you visualize in a positive manner. The deity takes over, that the energy of God takes over. We are invoking the energy of God. It's not under our control. But I'm just saying that this is the benefit I have always experienced is he takes over, she takes over, depending on the God of your choice. So otherwise what happens, we get what is called, I've just given an example of racing thought syndrome. If your child doesn't call you from school, then your thoughts begin to race, and it races so fast that you have no control. Why didn't she call, or why didn't he call? What has happened to him? Where are they? And it just goes off into some excessive worries. So we apply, and many of us may have experiences. Some of us experiences a lot of times. So for those, the best way for you to tackle that and forever take care of that is meditate on a name and form. Begin to bring that form into your consciousness every time and offer that tendency to worry at the feet. Once you apply that principle of surrender, that's why Vishuddha Chakra, the Anahata Chakra is about learning to surrender to the divine. Then the Brahma Granti opens automatically. All these are not one after the other, they all simultaneously work. Okay? So in Manomaya Kosha, that's what happens. In the Pranamaya Kosha, we saw what happens. In Annamaya Kosha, we saw what happens. So Kundalini gets caught in this vortex. And in that discourse that Baba gave that afternoon, he said, 99.9% of people live in this vortex. In this vortex. From here and below. So he said that in Telugu. So it may not be 99.9, it might be 90% or 99%. I don't know. He mentioned some number at that point. It was not clear. But he mentioned something like this very high number. So from here to, he says, all the people live in this. And then he even went to say that Swami and Dukitla Chestanaru, and he started imitating me and imitating generally. He says, oh, we start praying to God, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing that to me? All is because of these blocks. All because of these blocks. By then that Swami to Sai had happened to me, so I could relate to what Swami was talking about. So the Shakti, to me, the way I understand it, is gets trapped here. Then there is no more awakening beyond this point. Either we say this is enough for me, I'm happy here, but truly not happy because we feel the sense of separation, we keep running, we still caught in that emotional turbulence and so on and so forth. But this is what happens at the Kundalini level. What are the asana practice? Balancing poses has been a great help for me because remember, this is the wind element. The fire and the wind element have to be controlled. Okay? The fire, the flame in the candle, how do you protect it? By protecting it from the wind. So you have to get the wind very gentle and not blow so much that it blows off the fire. So the wind and fire have to be balanced, controlled. Balancing poses are the key to opening this Brahma Granthi, to loosening the knot. Balancing poses in addition to all the other poses we talked about. So Hatha Yoga, why do we do balancing poses? Why do I start with Tadasana? Is because we begin to open these knots. Because then wisdom comes. Because once Vishuddha comes and all of that, the clarity becomes so wonderful and so clear. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But the balancing poses help. Okay, balancing poses helps to balance the feet and hands and feet, I said. Why hands and feet? Manipuraka chakra is connected to two senses. One is the sense of sight, the other one is the feet. Heat comes through the feet as well. So we will talk about it in the fire element. Again, I don't have time to go into each of these. I'm resisting myself from explaining each of these. Otherwise, each point can take 15-20 minutes at least to give a little more idea. So feet. We need to balance the feet. So the Manipuraka chakra becomes balanced. Your digestive power, the acidity and all of that is controlled over the long run. Don't do it for 2 weeks and ask me why it's not working. Along with the lifestyle. Manipuraka chakra becomes balanced. Hands movement is connected with air. Hands are touch, sense of touch is connected with the air element, breath. So fire and air are controlled with feet and hands. So balancing poses with feet, balancing poses with hands. Now balancing poses hands, of course, are more difficult, right? So when we are beginners in yoga, we have to wait for that. So pranayama helps there, which is more subtle and more slow. But balancing poses definitely help. If you have children, that's why I keep telling people, if you have children with attention deficit disorder, hyperactive children, apart from reducing sugar in the diet, that's number one. Apart from that, just playfully begin engaging with them with balancing poses. Just pick up any balancing pose. Children can fall and get up. They're not going to hurt themselves so badly. You don't fall. But together, let's say, let's do a tree pose. Let's have a competition. Do a tree pose with one leg. And there are variations of tree poses. And then there are so many poses you can do just for the fun of it. Engage them, because in balancing pose, inadvertently, they are beginning to control the air element and the wind element. And so the chakra, once it's controlled, means chakra is getting clear. Chakra is getting cleansed. Then the petals will open and they will be guided. Okay? See, there are so many layers on this. Bandhas, kriyas, mudras. So we have already learned Uddiyana Bandha. That works. Nauli and Agnisara Kriya works. Vipirita Karani Mudra. We have learned all these three. So all these three begin to open up and work on your Brahma Granti as well. It's a combination of those two bandhas. Just like for Vishnu Granti. Just like for Brahma Granti, we did the Mula Bandha, the Vajroli Mudra, and so on. So those are the things that we did there. So similarly here, it is Uddiyana Bandha, Nauli, or Agnisara Kriya, and the Vipirita Karani Mudra. I have not started teaching it in the classes yet. Kind of given an idea in the intermediate, but we will do that hopefully in a short while. So it's a half shoulder stand. Very, very beautiful exercise, very powerful exercise. Anybody and everybody with hypertension, blood pressure, and all of this can practice, provided they are able to at least be physically fit to do the basics that is required in that pose of a half shoulder stand with a bolster underneath. So we will learn it. Those are the bandhas, kriyas. The pranayama practice here. You remember we did the Surya Beda, second version of pranayama. Yesterday we talked about it in the Anahata. So Brahma Granthi, you have to balance with the Chandra Beda pranayama. Chandra Beda is now the second version. The second version of Chandra Beda. The first version we already touched upon in the Swadhisthana chakra. The second version here is you breathe in through the left, breathe out through the right. Breathe in through the left, breathe out through the right. Breathe in through the left, breathe out through the right. You can combine this with mantras and so on. So Surya Beda was what? Yesterday it was right in, left out, right in, left out, right in, left out. Now it is left in, right out, left in, right out, left in, right out. We will just the pranayama asana practice, we'll try and tabulate it on the last day. I'll try and get them all, because when you say I want to do 45 minutes, 1 hour of pranayama, how you can do different stages of pranayama for each of these stages. Okay? Ideally it is 16 minutes each, but we may not have time for that. But at least I will share with you so that we will put them all together in case some of you are interested in practicing. So that is the Chandra Beda pranayama in combination with the other pranayamas. There is also another pranayama. This is more therapeutic in nature. This is for those of us who are in very hot seasons and in hot climates, in tropical climates, and who are also suffering from hypertension, blood pressure, excessive headaches, and so on. Sitali and Sitakari pranayama that cool the system. So we'll also learn the technique later on about these pranayamas. But Sitari and Sitakali, if you have your gurus and if you have learned it already, if you have this. Now don't practice this in winter, don't practice it in rainy seasons. I wouldn't suggest this to begin the practice. This has to, now if you're thinking of practicing Sitakari, it has to be from the next spring onwards. Don't start it going into winter. It is not a good practice. Unless you're living in Australia and it's going to be summer now. So springtime is where you need to enter these kind of practices. Sitali and Sitakari especially, because it cools the system. So it is good for hypertension, raising thought syndrome and all of that. Okay, very beautiful and very powerful exercise. Also during peak summer it helps keep the body cool. Alright. Then comes the meditation practice. Pick your chosen deity. Your chosen deity. Visualize the deity as filling from So the deity's face is in the Vishnu Granti from here. Then the body fills the Anahata. The feet rests over the Manipuraka. Let the deity fill the entire torso. From the navel till the Vishuddha, if you will. From here to here. Allow the deity. Okay? So visualize the deity, and when you do avahanam of the deity, in other words, when you invoke the deity, at this point you can just speak and say, please come within me, arise, or meditate on the deity and allow the deity to enter, allow them to settle like this. Because in your own mind, when the deity's, the guru or the god's feet is on Manipura, he controls that fire element. He blesses the food. She blesses the food, depending on, so it could be Vishnu, Narayana, Shiva, Sai, whomever is your most favorite of all, and in whom you can completely lose yourself. That's what happens. Then the deity begins to manifest very beautifully. And all of these, that is bhakti in this. Okay, this meditation is only through bhakti, and visualization is bhakti. Don't reduce it to a technique and say, how do I do it? And you figure it out. Okay, begin that conversation and slowly begin completely get lost in that. Because once Vishnu Granti opens, so many more beautiful things begin to happen. We experience those in very little tits and bits now and then in our everyday life because of divine grace. But how about letting that divine grace flow more beautifully? Namasmarana practice is, of course, the key for this. Kirtans, bhajans, chants, and group satsangs. Again, same practice that helps Manipuraka, Anahata, and the Vishnu Granthi. This is, even though this is a personal practice, meditation is, see, Adi Shankara would say, satsangatve nitsangatvam. So be in satsanga and be without satsanga. What does that mean? Satsangatve nitsangatvam. Be in satsanga, then go and meditate alone. Nitsangatvam. So meditation is your personal practice. Satsanga is where you sing kirtans together, bhajans together, begin to open your mind. Satsangs like these, where we learn from each other, and we get inspirations. Then you take that inspiration and go into yourself. Nitsangatvam. Nitsangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan mukti. So it goes, or nischalatatve nirmohatvam. The point is, when you go into aloneness, from aloneness becomes steadiness. In that steadiness, the delusion vanishes. And when the delusion vanishes, jivan mukti happens. Enlightenment comes. So that's what Adi Shankara gives us. So from satsanga, everything begins to happen. Satsanga is a very important stage in this. Otherwise, we get stuck here. Okay, what kind of satsanga you have to understand. You have to be the one to choose the kind of satsanga that will help you open these knowledge. You should feel at the end of a satsanga, you should feel elated, not sad and depressed. Feel elated and just in a blissful state of mind. If you are like that, then it is the right satsanga for you. Because the Anahata chakra is telling you that feelings that we talked about. It is giving you that indication. The chakra is the perfect vibrations are happening, and you feel blissful. You feel happy, content. Like, oh, I just want to be in this for a few moments more, right? That shows that satsanga is correct. You don't want to be ending up a satsangam, or satsanga is a group practice where you listen or talk or discuss with too much analysis going on in your head, and you're still confused and all of that. So allow the inspiration to always be there. At the end of satsanga, let that be your guide, your benchmark, if you will, of what kind of satsangas you should be in. Some people just enjoy simply listening to bhajan. They go into that mood very easily. That is divine grace. That is because of their lifetimes of practice and sadhana. The chakra easily tunes into that, and the granthi begins to loosen. And those are the moments where you get these more divine inspirations, and you go listening to bhajan, go to sleep, you might get divine dreams and so on. So, or listening to chants and go to sleep, you're loosening the knot. At that point, the energy is going freely. And then you might drift into sleep, and suddenly you might find a beautiful dream. if you do meditation and then go to sleep, or if you do yogasanas and you just want a small sleep after that, and not during shavasana, but after that. And when you sleep, you will notice that you will suddenly get very inspirational, very beautiful insights. Amazing experiences happen because the knot is opened already and you have nothing to distract you from tying the knot. You're not thinking of where's my cup of coffee, or you're not thinking of what next to watch, and you're not engaging in anything. You're in that state of mind. I used to love every evening after Baba's bhajans in the ashram, after watching him sitting there for 45 minutes or so during the bhajans, half an hour of bhajans, sorry. But then before that, sitting 1 hour before, because we are there from 5 o'clock, 5:15 onwards till 6:30. So the mind is so blissful that I would just walk quietly, not talk to anyone, just go into the Hillview Stadium as we now it's unrecognizable, I guess. When I see it on on videos, I don't even recognize it. I would just walk and take my own time to come back into the dorm and get settled. The mind is just floating, right? That is the right, perfect example of the Anahata Chakra vibrating in the right frequency. And as you continue your practice unabated, continuously, with the same intensity or similar intensity, what happens is that the chakras begin to reveal more and more and more layers begin to happen. I have no doubts that these things will happen to every one of us. So please, my dear brothers and sisters, know that the spiritual path is not a path of imagination. It is not a path that ends with some visualization exercises and some meditations and this and that, and don't get too caught with techniques. Know that with bhakti, if the energy opens up, it begins to pull the energies from down automatically up. If the energy opens down, it finds its way and pushes up. You don't have to understand how this energy works. You don't have to. Follow a spiritual lifestyle that is comprehensive. That is why I feel this is how I learned with Baba. Okay, so I have no other way to teach it. Hatha Yoga doesn't live in isolation. Hatha Yoga without devotion, to me, is incomplete. Understanding the Kundalini without understanding the worship of the Devi, meditation on a form and connecting to her, then without that, for me, Kundalini, the concept of feminine energy and Kundalini doesn't make sense. For me, that visualization, that connection, heart-to-heart connection, where the soul connects to that energy, the form, that to me completes it. So that without devotion to your guru, to the teacher, none of this happens. So without devotion, this path is incomplete. And then there comes the knowledge, the yearning to learn more, the yearning to continuously study and practice. So jnana begins to open up more and more. It also comes in. So all of these it's not a complementary path, it's one path. It's one path. You see it's one garden, you see different flowers and different rose plants, but they are all roses, different colors, but they are all roses. So understand this path, a spiritual path, as not a path in isolation. Especially yoga is understood something of isolation. Many people have told me, can you teach yoga without all this religious nonsense? And I said, no, I can't. And I tell them it is not religious nonsense, it's spiritual. And if you want to call it spiritual nonsense, then it's up to you. But I can't, because that's not how I learned. If I want to make money, yes, I can pick and choose, but that is incomplete to me. I cannot do that. It's impossible for me to even share. Not that I haven't tried it. I tried, but my conscience doesn't allow me. And it's incomplete. How do I explain a spiritual experience in a non-spiritual way? Why are we closing our mind to the idea of spirit? Why is spirit becoming so distant in our vocabulary today, in our dictionaries today, in our day-to-day life? Why does spirituality and spiritual choices become so far-fetched and something, we'll see about that later? So when we move that into the later, we are building a false reality, which we are beginning to call our home. All these are effects of granthis. Allow the granthi to stay open. Let the knot loosen slowly. Let us pray to the divine, that with the divine grace of the Sadguru, with the divine grace of the Almighty, these knots begin to loosen And our consciousness begins to not only rise up, this rising up is rising, the concept of rising up, going inwards and expanding, all are same. Okay, please meditate. They're not three separate ideas. We understand them as separate because there's the lack of ability to express what we are experiencing. So expansion, going within, going up, all are same. All of that happens together. The more you go in, the more the consciousness expands outside. And the more it expands outside, the more you become aware of higher dimensions. This is how going within, going up, or expanding all mean the same. So in Sri Chakra, if you're going above one gate is above the other, or is it within? Both are same. Anyway, thank you all for another delightful satsang. Let us pray that the divine goddess, the divine Devi Shakti, continues to guide us in ways that are perfect for each one of us. The universe that has orchestrated this magnificent creation knows exactly how and when and where to guide us. Let us trust this divine energy and simply lose ourselves in devotion, prayer, reverence, meditation, and sadhana with no expectations, just for the joy. We'll bring this satsang to an end with 3 ohms. Thank you again. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.